So I don't think Sony really expected the Nintendo Switch 2 to start off as strong as it did in getting some of the support that it's getting. That's why they've kind of hastily put together the situation in Japan with the price drop overall. I think that they discounted the PlayStation 5 over the Black Friday shopping period $100, probably more than what they actually wanted to, and they were probably thinking that maybe 50, but the Nintendo Switch 2 momentum is so strong they wanted to have a bigger weekend or bigger week when it comes down to that. And you know what, I'm all for it. I think that's great competition. I have a PlayStation 5 Pro. It's a fantastic system. It's such a good system that I feel no need or no rush to get a PlayStation 6 in the next couple of years or the next however many years that the system is going to come out, because the PlayStation 5 Pro is so good and runs games so well. I just feel content with that. So that's a testament to Sony and what they can do engineering their system. But I do think that if you're looking at what's happening, especially after the Game Awards, things are considerably different than where they used to be when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 1 and what happened when that system launched in 2017 compared to the PlayStation 4 and how things are going right now with the Nintendo Switch 2. So I want to take just a minute to go over some of the things that I feel that are incredibly important for the platform right now that I would say somewhat has Sony sweating just a bit. Once again, which is good because we need that competition, considering that Microsoft has kind of bowed out and put hardware on the back burner and ported their games over to multiple different platforms. I think that this type of competition is absolutely needed so we can get things like we saw with PlayStation doing the discount over the holidays or Black Friday and all of that. And we'll see what Nintendo does going forward. So let's go ahead and first start off with this game, Orbitals. Now, I've talked about this in a recent video, but this is exactly the type of thing that I foresaw for the Nintendo Switch 2 in the future. You get certain independent developers that are making AA or making indie, high quality indie, that they can focus on the Nintendo Switch 2 and bring something very unique to the table that's absolutely going to be a good seller if it ends up being good. And Orbitals seems like that's the type of game. You've got a studio in Japan that's focusing on one platform, whatever resources they have, and doing something that's a little bit different overall, taking what people love about co-op adventures. It Takes Two, Unraveled, in addition to Split Fiction, but then also making it their style. 80s retro-inspired anime co-op gameplay, old school styles thrown in with some new spice kind of in there. Man, that is exactly what I'm talking about, and we need to see more of that with the Nintendo Switch 2, which I do think in 2026, 2027, there will be other AA or indie developers in Japan that kind of go all in and find a publisher, because the platform is hot, that will be willing to take on these type of projects. Listen here, guys, if the Nintendo Switch 2 doesn't start off the way that it does, if they don't have the type of sales clout that it has, will this type of game even get funded? Will get a publisher like Kelper that picked this one up? I'm not so sure that they feel confident enough to bring this over as an exclusive. So that's one of the reasons why big sales or great sales help out things when it comes to the consumers, because now we get developers that are excited, that want to develop for the platform because they know that there's at least going to be an audience to sell through. When you have flops like the Wii U, you're not going to get games like Orbitals when it comes to an exclusive on the platform. It's going to probably come out to other platforms or just PC via Steam first. So it's super cool to see something like that. And once again, I think we're going to see a lot more developers take this kind of angle with the Nintendo Switch 2 in 2026 and 2027. Now, before we get into the next thing, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, and click that notification bell to get my videos as they drop. And let me know what you guys think about kind of Sony sweating a little bit with some of this stuff in addition to a game like Orbitals. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about here is where Sony's kind of sweating just a bit, is the Pragmata and Capcom support. Now, what we've seen before is that we've seen Capcom come out and say that they think the PlayStation 5 is too expensive. And almost in a direct response to that, because of the whole Monster Hunter Wild situation where the game is selling pretty terrible at this point, Sony rushed to put together, also with the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, this is the reason why they did this, rushed to put together a Japanese-only language model PlayStation 5 discount. That only got approved in 4 months. That usually takes longer to do a permanent discount on something, considering how many different layers you have to go through with that when it comes to retail, production, manufacturing, all of that. Is it going to work sales-wise? What are you looking at? Revising forecasts, whatever the case is, right? So Sony put together all of that in response to the Nintendo Switch 2, in addition to probably Capcom saying PS5 is too expensive in Japan. It got multiple price increases already, and I still think it's not even quite to the price that it was at the launch of the system in 2020 for Japan, but it's still cheaper now with that digital-only Japanese language model. But now if you're looking at it, Sony also has some other things to worry about, because in Japan, they had a monopoly when it comes to the AAA game space. When it comes to AAA, pretty much you can only get it on PlayStation. Sure, there was an Xbox version, but nobody's buying Xbox in Japan overall. Nintendo never got those games. They would get different versions altogether, like Monster Hunter Rise, or they would get a pared down version years later at some point when nobody really cared as much, like Doom 2016 or Skyrim or something like that. But now we're actually seeing Capcom put out day and date big AAA third-party games. Resident Evil Requiem, for example, in addition to Pragmata, those are both dropping day and date on the Nintendo Switch 2 in Japan as well, and that is going to take a chunk when it comes to Japanese sales, because the Switch 2 just passed 3.1 million units already. That's double what the Nintendo Switch 1 did in the same time frame of about 6 months, and significantly better than any other platform overall in recent memory. And I think it's actually passed up and selling faster than the previous record holders in Japan in the first 6 months, which is the GBA, and I think the PlayStation 2. So it's doing better than those as well now with that massive 200,000 unit week that it posted last week with the launch of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. So I do think that Sony's looking at all of that, and they're looking at some of those big third-party sales that would usually go to them when it comes to Japan with Resident Evil and with Pragmata, and now a chunk of that is going to go to the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, how much is going to go there? That's what I'm super excited in seeing, because once again, competition is good. We don't need Sony having monopolies on AAA games in Japan, because the Xbox brand is just essentially DOA and has been DOA since 2020 when they launched the Xbox Series. So it's good to see that competition in the AAA space when it comes to games for Japanese gamers out there. So we'll see how Pragmata, in addition to Resident Evil, does as well. So very good on that front, and I'm pretty sure, like I said, Sony wanted to try to see what they can do to help kind of pull away from that. But once again, we'll see how they do next year as people get more acclimated and when we see some of the bigger third-party games that have historically kind of boosted sales a bit in Japan. So we'll see what happens on that front as well. Now, another thing that I feel is pretty major overall is the fact that the Nintendo Switch 2 and what it does in terms of what we saw here in the West at the Game Awards. Now, yes, we got a few different announcements. There's still a lot of games that are obviously skipping the Nintendo Switch 2 or might get announced later or going to be late ports or whatever, which I think here in the West, in Europe and all of that, like it's going to be to where PlayStation still kind of has that sizable type of lead overall, as once again, Microsoft bows out. But the cool thing that I felt that was very important for Nintendo to establish heading into next year and trying to get people to buy the system was, hey, you can play these massive AAA games. Sure, not at the best quality when it comes to PC or PlayStation 5 Pro, but what you can do is you can actually play them in pretty good quality and anywhere that you want. So if you're on a lunch break at work, or if you have a long commute on a bus or on a train or something like that, this might be a system that you want to pick up for some of your biggest games. So there's going to be more than just one option or more than just what the usual options are for a console, but with this console, you can do it anywhere that you want. And I like the fact that they showed off 3 games here that are more for that Game Awards type of crowd. Resident Evil Requiem, I think that game is going to be fantastic on the Nintendo Switch 2 based off of the RE engine and what we're hearing about Pragmata, which we'll talk about in just a bit. Also, Duskbloods. That game is a title that I would have liked Nintendo to show off an actual big or new trailer for that game at the Game Awards, but maybe they're holding on to that for the Nintendo Direct. But FromSoft is huge when it comes to the people that vote and play Game Awards stuff. Elden Ring, Sekiro, these are 2 Game of the Year winners type of games. I'm not sure if the Duskbloods is going to be up to that level, but it's still something that I bet a lot of the people that watch the Game Awards are like, okay, well, what's this about? We'll see what happens when the reviews come out and when the gamers actually get their hands on this, because a lot of them are probably skeptical about Nintendo hardware hardware, simply because From Software doesn't really put out a lot or put out stuff on Nintendo hardware overall. So I do think that The Dust Bloods is another great game, and I like the fact that they showed that off, in addition to Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. So these are all games 2026, but showing that you can play these high quality games that are gonna look and play good enough on a screen anywhere that you want. That is super important overall, and I think helps when it comes to what Nintendo wants to do in 2026, which is get some of that AAA mindshare that they normally didn't get on the Switch 1, or it was so late to the point where it didn't matter, or it looked so bad in comparison to PlayStation and Xbox. Sometimes people just disregarded it overall, but now it's a lot closer in terms of the look of it because of the boosted power, how things are going at this point. So very cool that they showed that commercial. They also put that out on Twitter and on YouTube and everything, so that was a great ad overall for the core gamers out there and the people that are kind of not necessarily into Mario and Zelda and into a little bit different types of games. So let's get to this last point here, and I kind of alluded to it a bit, and that's how the RE engine and what's going on with Pragmata. Now, apparently the developers were surprised on how well Pragmata ran in terms of the quality of it on the Nintendo Switch 2. Here's what the developers had to say recently in an interview and a discussion, and this is Oyama. He said this first when it comes to Famitsu about Resident Evil Requiem and of course Pragmata. I think it's reaching a level that stands shoulder to shoulder with Resident Evil Requiem. He's talking about the game Pragmata. We plan to release a demo on every home console the game will launch on, so I hope everyone will give it a try. It's shaping up to be something thoroughly enjoyable. Please wait just a little longer. Now, Mr. Zhao also said this: when we first got it running on Switch 2, even the development team was surprised, saying, wow, it actually runs at this level of quality. The reaction was very positive. Now, this is something that we did not see with the Nintendo Switch 1 when Capcom first got that hardware. They actually had to beg Nintendo, saying, hey, look, maybe you guys should put some more RAM in this, or there's different types of scenarios in terms of what Capcom might have said or not. But either way, I think that they needed that. Somebody needed to say that to Nintendo, whoever it was, or wherever the story goes, that needed to be said, because even with the small amount of RAM in comparison to other platforms the Nintendo Switch 1 had, Capcom still tried to get things going, but they really couldn't get some of their biggest RE games going. They were saying that they just couldn't get it. So whatever they couldn't get going, they had to put in cloud version or something like that, which was silly. I don't like cloud games overall, so glad that they put it, but still don't want to play Resident Evil on the cloud. But now we're actually getting the full RE engine experience games on the Nintendo Switch 2 in good quality overall. Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 seemingly are going to run very good on the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm pretty sure we're going to get Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 in a triple pack, just like we're getting 7, 8, and Requiem or 9. So I do think that this is very much a shifting of the guard for Nintendo and Capcom, as they seemingly are going all in on the Nintendo Switch 2, and Capcom games are some of the best selling games overall, with high ratios on the PlayStation platform for consoles and of course PC, but PlayStation takes home a big share of that. I think there's going to be a little bit of that chunk divided now that I feel that Sony's definitely looking at here. That's going to go to Nintendo, especially if these versions of Pragmata and these versions of Resident Evil are really good or good enough, because you can play that game anywhere that you want. Now, of course, for some hardcore, they're going to really just want to play on the PlayStation 5 and all that, and I get it. I'm not saying that the Switch 2 is going to completely steal all the sales. That's not going to happen, guys. Resident Evil is going to do great. Pragmata is going to do great on PlayStation. I just think now with the improved quality of some of these games coming off of what we saw from the Nintendo Switch 1, it is a big deal in terms of things, and I think that's why Sony's kind of looking at it in a certain type of way, dropping the price by 100 Black Friday, which I don't think they've done before on a holiday yet with PlayStation 5, and it's into the situation that went on in Japan with having that Japanese only permanent price drop on the PlayStation 5 digital systems, along with some sales as well. So once again, competition's good. I think that they are kind of turning things up a little bit when it comes down to that, and we'll see what Nintendo does when it comes to the sales and in response and some of the other things, but I'm just excited to see how this is going to go going forward overall. So what do you guys think when it comes to what I talked about here with Sony and Nintendo, in addition to some of the games that are happening? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 and RPG content right here on screen, like one of me talking about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond Sales, or an RPG roundup video counting down some of the best ones that you can pick up. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.